Today on the Coach of Podcast, we have a very special guest. He's currently the head women's soccer coach at College of Southern Idaho. Prior to coaching here, he spent time coaching at places like Whittier College, Mater Dei High School in California, as well as spending time coaching in England while he was getting his master's degree. Today, we'll welcome Coach Andrew Zaleski to the Coach of Podcast. With the world of coaching evolving and the carousel always changing, we're going to sit down with some coaches and we're going to figure out what they coach, how they coach, and most importantly, why they got into this profession. My name is Kason Wilkinson, and I am your host of the Coach's Why podcast.
That's a great question.
That was my Coach's Why.
Welcome back to another Coach's Why podcast. We have a very special guest in the house today, Coach Andrew Zaleski from College of Southern Idaho. He is the women's soccer coach up there. Coach, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing well, man. Thanks for jumping on. Thanks for the patience too. I thought we've kind of been, feel like we've been trying to get this done for a few weeks and everything, and finally got the time frames to give it a go. So I appreciate your patience and willing to jump back on, even though we've had some schedule mishaps for sure. I know we've talked a little bit, and I know you've mentioned that you've listened to a few things or a few of our episodes before, and so kind of the same start to everything. I'm going to have you kind of pass the baton over to you, if you would, and kind of let us know a little bit about kind of who you are, where you grew up, and when you got involved in sports. But because you are the soccer coach, maybe as well, letting us know when you got involved with the sport of soccer.
Yeah. So I grew up in Indiana. I've always been involved in soccer from, like 4 years old or whenever they start the youngest league. Growing up in Indiana, basketball is the main sport, but I kind of always stuck with soccer, played basketball here and there, baseball, swimming, kind of an all sport athlete at times. But grew up playing soccer, didn't play in college, went to Indiana State, studied there, started coaching while I was in college, did some research with the professor there around soccer fitness. And he kind of encouraged me to get my master's, went on and got my master's in sports coaching in England, coached there, got a couple licenses and things like that. But, that was kind of the start. I've always known I wanted to coach. Before I knew coaching was my profession, I was always like, I'm going to do this, and then coach soccer. So it's always been my passion and kind of something I've wanted to do at some level.
So I know you just said that you didn't play in college. And now I will be honest with you too. So I've gotten to a point where I don't just necessarily ask questions. I'm going to skip around, right? I might come back to a personal question towards the end. But I know that you just now mentioned that you didn't play in college, but you knew you wanted to coach. So was that something that were you ever worried about? Obviously now that you are a college coach, which I'll get to in a little bit, but because you didn't participate in college, was that maybe something you were a little bit nervous about when you got the opportunity to coach in college, just because you may not have went through some of the same, you weren't that college kid to kind of know how college, every program's different, but the idea of it is. So was that something you're nervous about whenever you got the opportunity to coach in college, just knowing you didn't participate in it?
A little bit. I'd say I was most nervous about not playing college soccer when I first wanted to get into coaching, because I felt a little, underqualified, especially when you start looking at college jobs. When I got to that point, a lot of them say college playing experience, college coaching experience. And so I would say it made me nervous, but it drove me to learn more on my own and kind of self-educate. When I started coaching in California, and I was like, okay, this is really what I want to do and be serious. I knew that was kind of a weakness on my resume. And so I just doubled down on everything else and tried to go to other coaches' sessions, have other coaches come to my sessions. I read a ton of books and just tried to make it to the point where if someone was like, well, you didn't play, I could be like, yeah, but I already know all this. I have this experience. I have this knowledge, right? And kind of be able to gloss over that a little bit.
I like it. Yeah. So you did all your homework to make sure every other area of the profession was able to be covered.
Yeah. So I kind of recognized my weakness and was like, okay, I'm going to make it difficult for someone to push me away just for this one thing.
Right.
And when I first wanted to get into coaching, um, I was kind of like, oh, like I don't know, people may not respect me, right, because of this thing I didn't do. Uh, um, it, it was actually at my brother's wedding, a guy who played like arena football that was there, and I was talking to him about it, and I was like, I want to coach, but I'm afraid like this is something that's gonna hold me back. And he was like, no, man, like some of my best coaches didn't play at a high level.
Mm.
And he was
Yeah.
like, don't let that hold you back. Like, take your own pathway and learn as you go. And that was
Yeah.
like the jump start. I was like, all right, got it.
I love that. I love that. Yeah. It's interesting because what he said I found is I've heard that before. I feel like you don't have to be, a Tom Brady, or you don't have to be, in soccer terms, right? You don't have to be a Messi or a Tim Howard or somebody of that nature, right? To Donovan
Yeah.
to be a good coach, right? And sometimes I've even seen this. Not only have I seen it, but I've heard it that some of the best players were bench players, or some of the best coaches, excuse me, were bench players, just because they got to see the game. They got to see what worked, what didn't work, and they really kind of got to see the game from truly a bird's eye view, right? They got to see
Yeah.
everything, how the practices and stuff were ran, but because they weren't actually playing the game, at least consistently, they got to see it. So I love that he brought that out to you, or he said that to you, because obviously that probably drove you and gave you a little bit more motivation to not that you
Hmm.
didn't lack it already, but kind of just gave you that little extra bump to keep going. Um,
Yeah.
so I was college coaching, which here, let me ask this first.
Okay.
Um, Talk a little bit about your timeline. So, I know you said that you went to college, you were studying, you wanted to coach. So tell me kind of where you started at in the game of coaching, and how did you get to College of Southern Idaho?
Um, yeah. So kind of a pathway that took me all over the place. So like I said, I started coaching when I was in college.
Mhm.
And that was with like a local high school club team.
Okay.
And I would say this is probably the point where I was like, I know I want to do this, because I'm a goalkeeper, and so my professor who was coaching the team was like, "Come coach my goalkeeper, and just like hang out or whatever." Um, and I was coaching the goalkeepers, helping with the team a little bit, and I had one goalkeeper who was going on to play Division 3, and another kid that was like, "I'm just here, kind of coaching for fun." And by partway through the season, the backup was outperforming the starter, the kid that was going on to play college soccer. And just working with that kid and seeing the development and the progression, and then him like overtaking the other player because of his attitude, his work ethic, like was so satisfying to me that I was like, this is what I want to do.
For sure.
Like that, seeing that happen, really kind of like jump started everything. But um, coached high school after that as part of like my internship for school. We had
Hmm.
to do an internship, so that was one of my coaching internships, was helping out with the local high school. From there, I went on and coached in England when I was there for a master's. Here, when I came back, started coaching club in Indianapolis. Coached there for a little bit. Stepped away because I wasn't making a lot of money. Had to focus on another job and had to focus on finishing my thesis, that I had kind of dragged out because I was like, I was back in America and I was like, oh, I'll get that done. Let me do other stuff. So kind of took a step away for a minute. Stepped back into coaching. This is probably 2015, 2016. Coaching high school at Cecina Memorial, which is a small high school in Indianapolis. Had a lot of success there, coaching with Coach Jesse Purvis, who was a lot of help with me in terms of kind of navigating, you know, wanting to be a professional in the sport. He was a teacher, and I feel like he gave a lot of guidance to me in that sense. Still being kind of a young guy. Went to regionals with that team, and then from there, moved to California. Started coaching in California, and like I said earlier, this is really where I started to take it serious. Started coaching one team when I moved to California at a club. And by the time I left in 2020, I was coaching 5 teams. I had 2 club teams. I was coaching at Mater Dei High School, which some people may know. Mater Dei is a pretty big high school in terms of sports. Their football team's
Absolutely. Yeah.
really
Actually,
good.
one of the best in the country for sure.
Yeah, and there's a lot of good soccer players that come through Mater Dei. So I was coaching there on the women's side, and then I started coaching at Whittier College, which is a Division III school under Derek Hanks. And then right before COVID, I started coaching a UPSL team, which is like some people call it semi-professional. It's like an amateur men's team is the best way to describe UPSL.
Yeah.
And yeah, I just was doing everything. Any opportunity that came my way in California, I was like, can I add to my resume? Yes, I'll do it.
Yeah,
I'll do
absolutely.
it. And then when COVID hit, it kind of made coaching difficult, obviously in California, everything's shutting down. I had a buddy that I did a coaching course with in California that had moved to Florida. And he gave me a call around that time that everything was shutting down. And he was like, things in Florida are open. I just became a director of a club and I needed an academy director. And I said, I'll do it. So moved to Florida, jumpers at Florida Southern, which is a Division II. Did that, became an academy director, moved on to a site director at another club in Florida. And then I'd say last year was when I was kind of like, okay, I want to jump out of club completely. I want to go the college route, really, go 2 feet in with this. And now I'm at College of Southern Idaho.
Yeah. There's a few things I want to talk to you about off of what you just mentioned. So I guess back to that original question when I asked you, or maybe not original question, but I asked you about like the nerves of going to college. I can kind of see how maybe like you might have been a little bit nervous, but you might have had a lot of confidence just because you did have so much experience prior to, right? Like you were in high school, you're at Mater Dei, which you already know there's a lot of probably pressure as a coach there, but just in general, really successful high school program, across the board, I should say, organization. And then obviously the semi-pro and all this stuff. So going to college might not have been such a big leap as much as I might have thought, just because I didn't know those things about you. So I can appreciate you breaking that down a little bit. And as you were mentioning, you've been doing this for probably about a decade or so now, maybe a little bit longer, right?
Yeah.
And so I know, and you said you always wanted to coach and things like that. I mean, what was it? And forgive me if I missed it, but what was it about your experience? And I know it really, I think, pushed over the edge when you were mentioning whenever you were developing that kid, and he was able to kind of outperform. But what was it about that initial like experience that was like, I want to coach, right? I mean, what was it that really pushed you over the edge to be like, I want to do this? Obviously, this was before you got to coach that kid. What was it? What was it about that made you want to do it?
I mean, just my passion for sports, for soccer. I mean, growing up as a kid, I come from a big sports family. My grandfather was a diehard Notre Dame fan. He grew up recruiting. He recruited for Notre Dame football. Everyone in my family plays sports. And in my mind, I was always like, I'm going to go play college soccer and then I'm going to go play professionally. Even in high school, I would watch MLS, I'd watch replays, game breakdowns, and I'd read articles where it was like the lowest paid player makes $17,000. And I was like, I don't care. They can pay me 10 grand. I'm going to go play soccer.
Yeah.
When I realized that wasn't going to happen, coaching was like, all right, I want to coach. Like, I just want to be involved in the sport. Knowing nothing about coaching and nothing about how really any of it runs, especially in high school and early college, I was just like, yeah, like I know soccer. I played soccer. It's going to be easy. I've learned the hard way that it's not as easy as you think it's going to be, but I've loved it every step of the way. And I almost want to say like my passion for it has gone up the longer I've done it, the more people I've encountered, talked to, the players I coach, the good and the bad. It just continues to reconfirm this is what I want to do and what I love doing.
For sure, yeah. So you're mentioning that you grew up in Indiana, and then you got the opportunity to go. Obviously, you lived overseas for a little while, but then you went to California, Florida, and Idaho.
Yeah.
So, what is there any differences in playing style or anything different, like within the game of soccer between each of those states, or like in the game or in wrestling, which is kind of my forte when it comes to coaching. I think the sport of wrestling is pretty similar, right? If you're wrestling, you're wrestling. But I felt like, some states may be a little bit more technical versus other states might be a little bit more physical, right? Maybe more speed versus this. Now they obviously have all of those things incorporated with those states, but you kind of see more of maybe of a bigger ratio in this area versus that area. Producing that, which might just be me, not kind of maybe naive to it, just because I haven't necessarily seen like New Jersey in person, or I haven't seen like Florida wrestling in person, whatever. I just kind of see it from an outside view, and then just the states I've been to see. But that's kind of something that I feel like is something that may be something in the sport of wrestling. So I guess. Mm-hmm. In the game of soccer, is there any really differences that you might have seen between the game between those states you've been to and the game of maybe technicality or physical or schematics or anything of that nature?
I'd say the biggest thing I've noticed between the three states I've coached in is the pool of top level players. Because wrestling's, in my mind, I don't know a lot about wrestling. I did jujitsu for a little bit and we wrestled, and it's a difficult sport. I understand that.
Yeah.
Because there's 11 players in the field, there's different positions, and people usually like to, I play like Messi or I play like this player. Styles seem to tend to like bleed over. I mean, a lot of people copy other coaches or copy, players copy different players. Maybe this is a bias because I'm from there, but I like to think that players from the Midwest are a little bit more hardworking or industrious. I don't know. Growing up, kind of that Midwest mindset of being like kind of gritty. I found maybe in other states it's not as much, but it could have been the areas I've coached in. I'd say that's a big factor in kind of the kids you coach is the area you coach in, because in California you kind of get a mixed bag of kids from different classes, social classes, so they kind of blend together. In Florida, it's a little more like, okay, I coach a club in like a higher upper middle class area, or I coach a club like kind of more in the city or maybe out in the country, and I have these kinds of kids. So I'd say that's the biggest factor in kind of the style of soccer you play. Because a lot of it comes down to the awareness of the players and the parents of soccer, if that makes sense. So like, how much soccer do they watch? How much do they like know the game? I feel like that has a big impact on kind of like how you play or the types of kids you get, because you can get kids that are talented, but the parents don't know anything about soccer, or the kids don't watch soccer. Or you can get kids that, grew up on the game, their parents grew up on the game, and their understanding's a little bit better. And I'd say there's more of those kids in maybe California than Florida or Indiana, where I've coached.
Yeah. So, I mean, no, I really like that there's kind of that big pool. And I, like you said, I think that how they grew up based off of who they, like you said, family and whether they're new to the sport or they've been doing it for a long time does play a factor into maybe their maturity in the sport, or maybe just like understanding the game a little bit. So I can appreciate that you've noticed the difference between the states.
I'm sure you've heard, or maybe doing research or whatever, like soccer in America is very much kind of a pay to play. I mean, it is a pay to play. So Absolutely. That's also a big factor in kind of the kids you get and the type of kids you get, because I've worked at clubs where it's expensive to play, so you get a lot of certain type of players that their parents are like, well, I pay all this money, so I deserve to be on this team, right? And sometimes those aren't always the best kids, but it's the kids that you have to put on your roster.
Absolutely. Yeah, I definitely understand. I guess realistically, whenever you're talking a little bit about like the pay to play thing, do you think that that's hurting the game itself, or do you think that helps the game? Maybe not necessarily maybe not necessarily like help the game out, because that probably does cause more politics than anything in the level of whatever it is, right? However aspect you might be looking at it. But at the end of the day, right, like the idea of it is to try to get these kids into better positions. It's kind of the idea of what it initially started at. Now it's just a money thing to where it's like whoever's, as you said, whoever has the most money can play. But do you think, where do you think that sits, not only now but long term, and just for the game of soccer as well as maybe for the individuals who are in these clubs or in these travel ball things and these I guess clubs, as they're trying to obviously put themselves in a different position?
Yeah, it's difficult. This is a conversation in the soccer realm that people have a lot of pay to play, like it's bad. How do we fix it? For me, it's difficult because America's so big. I've been seeing this image a lot on Instagram where it's the travel of Inter Miami during the season, and then they take that map and they put it over the top of Europe, and it's like someone from London traveling to like Bulgaria or like Turkey or something. And maybe not that far, but you get the idea, right? Like they're traveling crazy distances, so it makes it difficult. I think in America, because the big clubs are so spread out, that for us to get away from the pay to play system and cast a bigger net to get kids that maybe can't pay those high club fees to be on those like top teams that get good training or get good matches and get seen by college coaches. There needs to be more professional clubs that can give that product for free, because that's how it is in Europe, right? A lot of kids play for their local clubs, which are usually bigger, or their feeder clubs for bigger clubs, right? The Division 2, 3, 1 professional teams. And so I don't really have a good answer for how we fix that besides just growing the sport and getting more clubs that can have academies and bring those kids in. Because
Absolutely.
I think, yeah.
I think you're right. I mean, you have to grow the sport, and I had another soccer coach I talked to, and he felt the same way. He felt like it's difficult with, for one, like the space between professional soccer, but in America, of having to travel across so far to actually see a team, but also because of kind of where the soccer actually is as America, right? Like and I think I might have mentioned this, but like the some of the best players in the world, most of the best players in the world, let's just say most, they came from, they didn't have a TV in the living room. They just knew it was soccer ball and playing with their friends outside, like Messi, right? And some of these guys who that grew up just for the love of the game, and they developed their own sports. They didn't pay a club or pay a coach to get them there. They worked into the local team, then they worked their way into, obviously by doing damage there, that then got them to this level, then this level, and then now they're playing for Brazil in the World Cup or whatever, right? After in their 19 or 20. So I do think it has to go, which in my opinion, I think it has to go back to like the love of the game and just like purity. Obviously, I'm not taking away what the pay to play is or paying for those coaches, because I think they are important in today's world. But at the same time, I do think like, I've said this before in other sports that we may not even see the best players ever touching the pitch for soccer, or we may not ever see the best players playing on a basketball court or whatever, simply because in some areas, right, like in order to be seen, you have to have money to be seen. And I'm not saying that's everywhere. You'll still see really good athletes, but like I know they said like, Michael Jordan, there was somebody who could have beat him. He just didn't have the opportunity. There, this guy, whatever, Tom Brady, there's probably somebody who's better than him, but they just didn't get the opportunity. And ever be seen. So I do think that it's like you said, just kind of doing it for the game of the sport, and as you mentioned, opening up more opportunities for players. That's not necessarily the pay to get onto the team way, for sure. I agree.
Yeah.
So as we were talking, and going back to what you mentioned about, I guess whenever you were kind of learning the skills of coaching and developing in the actual coaching side of things. What was hard about coaching, right? Like, what were some challenges transitioning from high school to college, or maybe just going from being at these high school levels and being an assistant coach to then kind of taking over your own program. What was some of the maybe difficulties or challenges that you might have faced that you might not have known about, or just in general?
I think the myth that I convinced myself of early in my coaching career was that I had to learn more. And obviously, I need to learn more. I'm always learning. I always like to use the phrase like lifelong learner. But in my mind, I was like, there's something I'm not doing, or that I'm not adding to my coaching that top level coaches are doing. And the longer I've coached and gone to coaching conventions, coached with other people, watched sessions, is that there's no secret thing that people are doing. It's really the X's and O's are the X's and O's. There's different variations of things you do. But a lot of it is the relationships. I've just how you carry yourself, how you coach, how you develop your teams, more than like learn along the way and develop. And like I said, I like to read a lot and do a lot of, sorry, let me turn that off. A lot of learning on the side. I'm really into sports psychology. So I read a lot of like self-help and like coaches' biographies and stuff like that, just trying to figure out, how can I better relate to my players and grow that way. But I'd say that's the biggest learning curve for me, is just kind of gaining that confidence as I go to be like, okay, I deserve to be here. I know what I'm doing. I know I had a coaching mentor years ago when I talked to him, and I was like, do you have days where you feel like you're not good at this? And like, you're just kind of spinning your wheels. And he was like, all the time. But he's like, that's how you know you're good, because if you're constantly analyzing and questioning yourself, that's the only way you're going to get better. And that was big for me, because I was like, okay, like I'm on the right path. I just need to keep growing.
Yeah, for sure. I love that. I would agree with what he mentioned too. Like there's quotes and stuff that I follow and really try to live by. And one of my biggest, just so you know, right, just to kind of keep that going, is one of the biggest things I struggle with was like comparing myself to other programs in this area, or maybe whether it's my state, my region, my nationally, whatever. So there was a quote that finally came to me, was comparison is the thief of joy. And I was like, and that really sunk with me. So I really had to focus on this. And, I was very analytical of myself as well. So long story short, before going into, another rant on my end about that, I could appreciate that you, as well as what he mentioned to you, but that you're analyzing to where, you want to be the best and you want to continue to grow, and doing that is the way to do it. So I can 100% appreciate that. And
yeah, I would say I can relate to that too, because I feel like, talking about that quote especially, there's times in my past where, I'm coaching, I'm confident, I'm doing what I feel like I need to be doing, but then maybe I'm not progressing as quickly as I want to. And that's where you can fall into that trap of, well, like, what is he doing? Or what is she doing? Why are they getting these opportunities? And I think in coaching, especially at the youth level, you can fall into that kind of negative cycle where, I don't know, you have kind of a negative view of your colleagues or other coaches in your area, because you're like, well, they're not that good of a coach. I coached against them. Like, why are they getting this opportunity? So I'd say that's something I've gone up and down through at times, where I've been frustrated kind of with how my path has gone. It's everyone has a different journey, but I can relate to that quote a lot and those reasons.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I think it's just one of those things, right? Like, and I don't think it helps whenever those coaches are finding success either, right? Or you walk into a program where, your local area has success, or maybe a history behind it. So, like maybe even if it's your school you're going to, that you're walking into has like a relatively good historical past of winning, right? You kind of are, and you don't see it right away. It's one of those things where it can easily kind of, you can lose sight of what you're, maybe not lose sight, but you kind of fall into that trap of like, why am I not finding it? What's different, right? Things like that. So I definitely agree.
Yeah. And like I said earlier, I've really tried to turn those moments into motivation, where it's like, okay, someone doesn't think that I'm at that same level, then I'm going to do this much more to prove them wrong, or just to elevate myself in a way of like, okay, like I'm going to grind harder
Right.
to get to where I
Yep.
want to go.
Yep. I agree. Yeah. If you can turn some of those, and that's what I tell my athletes too, right? Is like, you're gonna face some sort of mental, I wouldn't say blocking, but some sort of, you're going to find some sort of adversity you're going to have to overcome. And whether you overcome that the right way the first time or it turns into a negative aspect, right? A tough loss or tough practice or whatever, and you're down on yourself, turning that into a positive, or as you mentioned, motivation
Yeah.
is, you don't take L's and losses, you learn, right? We
Yeah.
don't take L's for losses, we take L's for learning to opportunity. So yeah, I mean, just finding ways to be motivational. And I think as a coach, you can't let those be shown, right? Like, you can't show your kids that you're down or beat up or whatever. I mean, and I guess there might be some coaches who are vulnerable like that, but I think that, like, it's a tough loss, right? You can't be in there, you know. You have to be the motivation, right? You have to be
Yeah.
the positive light, even if you feel that same way. You have to be a positive light for whenever it's a down situation or moment or whatever the case is. So, yeah, I agree. Just having to figure a way to
Yeah.
continue to grow and use that as a stepping stool for sure.
Yeah.
So, what do you love about coaching, and what do you dislike about it? If there is anything you dislike.
What I love is the relationships. Um, I love meeting other coaches. Coaching against different people. That's one thing I'd say. I mean, I'm early in my head coaching college career, but the relationships I have with some of the coaches in our conference already, I feel like it's a little different than the club scene where some coaches are more cutthroat. But I read a book years ago, Inside Out Coaching, and something it talked about was how in American sports, maybe sports all over the world, that it's like a common thing where the other team is my enemy or the other coach is my enemy, right? And it creates this hostility or this negative, environment. And ever since I read that, I've always looked at it as, we need both people. We need both the coach, the players to play the sport, right? To have the dance. And so they're trying to accomplish the same thing as I am. And so I don't look at them as that way. I look at it as, all right, how do I outsmart you? How do I outplay you? And so when I play against coaches that are good at what they do, I really love it. I appreciate it. Like when I've been in games where it's a tactical duel, I love it because it's like, okay, how he did this, how do I change and outsmart him here? And those are the games where at the end of the game, like I really, like I shake the coach's hand and I'm like, man, that was a great game.
Yeah,
Like, good fight.
absolutely.
And then with the players, obviously, like I've had a lot of players over the years that, um, change the way you coach or change the way you deal with players because, as coaches, we always talk about the impact that we have on players or our athletes, but I think it can be the reverse as well, where players have an impact on us of, things they do or like how they respond to things that we do. And it really kind of changes or opens up your mind to, man, I never thought about coaching this way or, just things like that that can have an impact on you as a coach. Things that I don't love, it's why I got out of club was I kind of got fed up with dealing with the politics, like you said earlier, of club sports and things of that sort. Um, you know, having players that are less desirable to deal with, however you want to phrase it, or trouble players has never been a thing that's like, oh, this makes me want to not coach. For me, it's like, okay, how do I navigate this space? How do I bring that player back into the group? And for me, it just kind of keeps me on my toes in terms of dealing with personalities and stuff like that. But uh, yeah, the parents is definitely probably the biggest negative for me.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely can understand where that comes from for sure. So, and I know that you were saying, like, whenever, going back to what you just mentioned about when you face a really good coach, or a coach who's been doing it for a long time, who does have success, whatever, right?
Yeah.
Like, how do you decide? I guess this is gonna be a two-parter. So,
Okay.
like, how do you are you choosing your formation based off of the players that you are have in your program and how they develop, right? Like I know in the 2-year school space, it's obviously, you're in and out, it's very, very small time frames of building an opportunity for your, not opportunity, but you have a small time to develop your athletes, right?
Yeah.
I guess my question for you schematically, right? Like besides running a 3-5-2 or 4-3-2-1 or 4-2-2-1 or whatever the case is, right? 4-2-1-1, whatever, however, yeah, that last one was right. 4-1-3-2, something like that, right? Obviously, you have all these different options for your formations. So, is this something like you have a preferred preferred formation, and you're recruiting girls to fit that, or are you kind of adjusting your schemes based off of the girls that you currently have, as well as how they develop, or are you changing? Are you choosing schemes based off of who you're playing, right? Like, how are you? Yeah, I guess you can answer that in 1 part, 2 part, 3 part. However, I don't. There's really 3 questions.
Yeah. No, the question makes sense. So at College of Southern Idaho, we had a set formation. It was a 3-5-2. It's a formation that I've liked a lot in the past couple of years. I've used with the girls and women's teams that I've had. I've picked it in the past because of the players I had, and I was like, okay, this makes sense. When I first started using it, it was more of, I don't think coaches are going to know how to coach against this at the level I was at. And I thought I could maybe outsmart teams at times, with, overloading certain areas or attacking in different ways than people are used to. Because at the youth level, youth soccer pushes people to play a 4-3-3. A lot of coaches play that, or 4-2-3-1. But at the college level, we played that up until we had 3 ACL injuries this year on the women's side. 2 happening at the beginning of our conference season. 2 big players for us that were kind of what we based our formation around. So when we lost those players, we had a run of bad games. And so we decided, okay, maybe this isn't working so much for us now with the personnel that we have. Let's change. And then part of that too for me was, because we had some bad games, I was like, I think changing the formation will kind of, I don't want to say this, maybe give the group new hope, right? It's like a mental thing. It's like, okay, this is the formation we're playing. It's not working now because of personnel. We're going to change. We're going to adapt, right? And I think on the women's side that helps a lot, because it's something, it's just like, okay, we're going to change something to fix the holes that we have right now. So we did that a little bit. In terms of recruiting, I know what the kind of players I like and the kind of style I want to play. So style and formation are a little bit different. Styles kind of like, do you play direct? Do you play possession? Do you play counter football? And then formation is just like, how do you set up to play that way? But for me, the 2 years, I'd be interested to talk to other coaches about this actually, is for me, 2 years, it's like, okay, I'm going to recruit the best players I can, and then I'll just adapt around them, right? Because it's going to change every couple of years. At a 4-year school, in my experience, I assume that you have your style and you recruit based on that, because you have players longer term, right? You have, you're going to have this player for 4 years, 3 years. And you can kind of be like, okay, I'm going to fill the gaps here and there. But like this year I had to recruit, I'm up to 9 players for the next year. I mean, it's a lot.
Yeah, no, it
almost
is.
like starting 11, right? So,
yeah,
every year it's like I'm basically recruiting a new team. So it's kind of like I could really go year to year. It's like, okay, I lost all these players. Next year I want to play this way, so I'm going to recruit this kind of player. So I think it changes. I think as coaches we can't be so, this is exactly how I'm going to play. I play this formation, I play this style, so I go to the board and go, you need to buy this player, this player, this player, because this is how I play, right? It's not the reality of college soccer or youth soccer in America. So
right.
Adaptability.
I actually, just for shits and gigs, I actually love you run a 3-5-2. That was my favorite formation to run on FIFA. I ran 3-5-2 for about 7 straight FIFAs. So I actually love 3-5-2. But
what team do you play as? That's the important question.
Depends on the year, right? So like from like 2012 to like 19, I ran international. I ran with Sweden because Zlatan's my favorite player. So I ran 3.52 in
Okay.
Sweden.
Yeah, yeah.
If I was running club, I guess during that time I ran a lot of Atletico Madrid, and then I ran a lot of for some reason FC Galatasaray. I loved running with them.
Okay.
And then if we're talking like newer FIFA, I just haven't had as much time to like truly play the game, so I kind of just play with the players I like. So pretty much anywhere Mbappe was, so I'd run France, I'd run obviously PSG,
Yeah, yeah.
and then if I had to choose not as high ranked or high rated team, internationally, I'd probably run with. Dang, that's tough. Who did I like to run with? I like to run with South Korea. I love to run with Son as my striker, and or just for in gigs, I like to run with Mexico. I did like running Mexico, but yeah, I mean club wise, yeah, I mean I would run PSG. I'd run. I'll be honest with you. I didn't run a lot of Premier League teams because I don't like a lot of Premier League teams.
Okay.
I'm an Arsenal fan if I'm talking Premier League. But
Yeah,
like
yeah.
I say this because like I'm not a fan of Chelsea. I can't stand Chelsea. I can't
Agreed.
stand there's so many teams within that. Maybe not the bottom of the table teams. Like I don't really whatever. But like the top teams, right? Like I can't
Yeah,
stand.
yeah.
I hated running Barcelona. I never ran Real Madrid. Like I didn't. I don't like running those teams just because I'm not like a bandwagon of those teams. So you won't catch me. You won't ever catch me as supporting any of their gear or playing
Yeah.
with them on the game. But yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't know. I guess it just depends on who I'm playing too. Like if I know this guy's gonna run with, he's gonna play with Messi. Like I know I'm gonna have to play a little bit faster defensive team versus maybe more of a physical team. Like if I was playing against Van Dijk and maybe De Bruyne, right? I have to kind of.
Okay.
I always said like I would play. I said I would play you with any team, but I let you pick the team first and then let me kind of play. If I get smoked, then I get smoked. But
Smart.
I at
Smart.
least want to
Okay.
know like if you were like this, I kind of have an idea of how you play. So let me pick opposite, or let me pick a team that will be able to compete physically against you in whatever facet that might be. Like that's why I like running with Zlatan because I'm like he's the best player, but I know I just have to score a lot of goals, so I'm gonna have to get the ball up in the air and get it in the box, so that way these guys, so I know he can use his size.
Yeah.
And so I ran with that. So people would play against me with a really big, defense because they knew that's what I was going to do. So I started picking that up when I started playing tournaments or whatever when I was younger. Was like they are picking me. So now that I'm older and I start understanding the game, let me pick against what you do, and then I can just learn how to play. So that's kind of how it is. So yeah, long story short,
Yeah,
but yeah,
yeah. Okay.
FIFA was my thing, bro. I loved FIFA for a long time. I still love FIFA. I just don't play as much anymore. But yeah, FIFA's my stuff.
Yeah, I've found that FIFA has been the biggest link of people who don't play soccer into the soccer world. I don't know.
It's
When I
actually
was a
interesting.
kid, I don't know how old you are, but when I was in high school, I feel like a lot of people didn't know soccer, but they were like, "Oh, you play FIFA, right?" And I'm like, "Yeah, soccer. I play soccer. Yeah."
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Well, so I'm 29.
Okay.
But it's actually interesting. Soccer is one of my favorite sports. I grew up playing soccer until I got to high school. That's when I stopped playing. But like, soccer is actually one of my favorite sports. I watch it every year. Like I just, at the time I was watching, like this last season, I watched most of the Division II playoffs. Obviously, I watched Vermont beat
Crazy.
Marshall. Yeah, I mean, and then I watched UNC beat Wake Forest. So like, I watch I watch World Cup every year or not every year, every 4 years. I usually try to watch a little bit of UEFA or excuse me, yeah, Euros. I actually watch soccer a lot. I actually really enjoy soccer. Soccer is one of my favorite sports to watch. But yeah, I do agree. FIFA is kind of like the bridge to people who don't know soccer or football. Sorry, they don't know football. They say, "Yeah, catch me on the field." I'm like, "That's how I know you don't know soccer because it's not a field, or they don't call it a field, I should say. It's a pitch."
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's just one of those things, right? We could talk about soccer all day, and I won't get bored of it. International club. There's so many aspects to it. I've talked to another soccer coach about like the opportunities for professionals, right? If my kids, I don't really care if they play certain sports, but if they get into soccer, like Obviously, I'll support them whatever they do, but the opportunities to go pro in soccer are way more vast than football or
Yeah.
I mean, basketball, I guess, has a lot of leagues, but realistically, like there's like 8 leagues in Europe, right? Beneath the Premier League. Maybe not 8, but there's at least 4 beneath the Premier League. Plus, in America, there's like you mentioned, there's 2 or 3, 4. You know, every country has a set of professional leagues, and it's pretty
Yeah.
crazy. You know, so there's so many opportunities within everything across the world. So it's one of those things.
Yeah, for sure.
So let me ask you this: how do you build a successful culture on the level of buy-in and mindset?
Um, for me, it's I think the buy-in comes with accountability. Something on my part that's big. I think in terms of the players and the coaching staff. I think the best teams I've had in the past for the culture and the buy-in has been when it's been our team. It's our team. Um, Here's the rules of the team, and I also follow these rules. So when I've had teams in the past, and maybe I didn't do something to the standard or I messed something up, I wasn't like, "Yeah, it's okay because I'm the coach." I was like, you know what, this is my fault. I take accountability, and I think it really lets players kind of let their guard down a little bit because they're like, okay, like, you know, he admits when he's wrong. He understands when we mess up, and it kind of creates that trust and accountability. And then I think that opens the door for everything else, where you can kind of like raise the standard. And you know, in a team like that I've had in the past, that's really been where I'm able to push players the hardest, because I think it's tough love without the player knowing at the end of the day you have their best interest in mind. So I think when I've been the hardest on players in that, you know, scenario, at the same time when they have a really good game, I'm the first one to put my arm around them and go, "Hey, like, great job." And I think that's the catalyst for creating that culture and that positivity that you want. The other thing that I've used, and a lot of the stuff I want to start implementing at college, at the college level at Southern Idaho. You know, I had a coach years ago. He's actually the coach at Portland right now, Nick Carlin Voigt. I went to his camp when I was a player, and something that always stuck with me that he told me was, when you make a mistake, don't go, "Oh, my bad. Oh, my bad. My bad." He's like, "You're not taking accountability." He's like, "When you mess up or you don't do something correct, say, I'll do better." And then do better, right? You know, so that was in training. So if we're serving balls or we were doing something with a partner, you know, and you messed up, you know, is, you know, "Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, my bad," is, "Nope, I'll do better." And then I think in your mind, when you say that, it kind of triggers you to like fix it.
I'll do
Right?
better.
Instead of just being like, "Oh, okay, oh, okay."
Yeah.
And I've used that with teams in the past, and it's something when you're like, okay, this is what we're gonna do, but then you start hearing players do it. It's definitely like satisfying as a coach, because you're like, okay, they're buying in. The mentality is correct. We're in the right path.
Right. So, how do you recruit your girls to kind of fit your culture? I mean, you know, we've already mentioned about the 2-year school, and I know you said like you know, before your school, the development and things like that. I've talked to other JUCO colleges, and they're talking about it's a revolving door, or it's a springboard to the next level, right? If girls want to go to the 4-year school, right? There's so many things about the JUCO world that I find fascinating, but I personally love the idea of coaching JUCO. Just because I think you have to be on top of your game, right, in order for you to not only find success but get these athletes to the next level. So I guess, how do you recruit these girls? I guess in general, right? I guess you can kind of let me know. Like, are you looking for these girls on a regional Idaho, like that northern area, or are you looking nationally? And then you can kind of dive into a little bit about, you know, how are you recruiting these girls based off of whatever your characteristics are to fit that culture that you're trying to build.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, like, the soccer part's big, right? You're looking for players that you think are going to raise your level, that are the diamonds in the rough, especially at the JUCO level. I think trying to find those kids that bigger schools just aren't looking at. I mean, at the JUCO level too, the grades are a big help in terms of like, okay, this kid doesn't have the grades to get into a bigger school, so maybe they'll trickle down to us. Or on the international side, the English. We've had a couple kids that come to us because maybe a big school's recruiting them, but they don't have a level of English to get into a bigger school. But on the girls' side, it's really the personality. Usually I have a couple conversations with the player, or if I go see him play in person, I try to talk to him after the game. But for me, the big thing is getting him on campus. I think um, that's where I can really get him in my element, talk to him. I invite him to training. They come train with the girls. I get to see him soccer wise in our environment, how they compete, but then also how they interact with the other players. Are they have a good attitude? Do they get along with the other players? And I've always leaned on my players when it comes to recruiting at the club level, at this level. If someone's, I mean, I've done this in the past where I had a girl come try out for a club team and I liked her. I thought she was good, but I had a little bit of an odd feeling. I was like, maybe not the personality for us. And so I had the group come talk to me and I go, okay, what do you guys think of this girl? And they were like, she's good, but I don't think she's going to fit the personality of the group. And I go, okay, that's it. That's it for me. Then I told her no thanks.
Wow.
But yeah, I think it's hard coaching and recruiting at this. I don't, maybe not just the JUCO level. I assume all four levels now because of how the portal works. I mean, I had a girl at Christmas go. She was a freshman. She goes, "Hey, I'm leaving, and I'm going somewhere else in the spring." And there's not really a whole lot I can do because it's the portal. They can leave whenever they want. So it definitely makes you keeps you on your toes. And I think having a good culture is really important now in terms of keeping those players. Because if your culture's not good, players will leave, especially if you're struggling. If you have a down year or a couple, whatever they think is
Situation
bad,
is,
right?
yeah.
Or they're not playing. It's really easy for them to go, okay, there's hundreds of schools I can go play for. I can reach out to maybe go play, and they'll just leave. So, yeah.
So I think that the portal is interesting for sure. Keep trying to keep that. I love that you said that you have to try to build that culture in order for you to keep these people, right? I mean, it's so easy for somebody to just don't want to be there anymore, just based off of whatever. So I'm going to double back on what you said about like you'll ask your girls after a training camp or a training session. I find that really cool that you do that because I know like you're kind of the end person, right? That obviously says yes or no to somebody, but I can appreciate that you have your people involved, your athletes involved in almost the decision making in a sense, right? They have an opinion on somebody based off of their interactions with them. And I actually I'm almost curious to know, like, because whenever I was on my recruiting visit, I think it was my recruiting visit. I can't remember if it was that or maybe it was over summer, but I do believe it was my recruiting visit. The coach had me go train for a practice when I went up there, and there were some athletes. Obviously, it was off season, but we went up there, and I did have some interactions with them. And I almost wonder if that's something that maybe either he had the conversation with them after, or if he was just kind of observing how I just kind of naturally fit in with the group. So I actually that's that's cool. I mean, I didn't really think of it like that in some senses.
Yeah, I mean, and it's interesting. I think more so with the girls and the boys, because the boys usually don't ask a whole lot when we had players come and train with the team. But the girls, if there's a girl that comes that's really good or her personality is just really positive and friendly, they'll ask me. They'll go, "Hey, are you gonna offer that girl a spot?" And if I'm like, "Yeah, I'm thinking about it," or "Yeah, I offered her a spot," they're like, "Oh, she's good. We like her a lot." And I kind of find it interesting because. Um, I've only had it once so far where a girl came and trained, and the girls were like, "Oh, are you gonna invite her back?" And I could tell by how they asked that they weren't a big fan, and I was like, no, probably not." And they were just like, "Okay, yeah, that makes sense," because the girls are always nice, right? They're not going to be like, "Oh, that girl wasn't good." But no, I think it's important. I mean, at the end of the day, like you said, it's my decision. I've definitely in the past had players express, "Oh, I don't know about this," but I knew it was a good decision. I'll go, "Nope, this is what we're going to do." But I think, again, going back to building that culture, I think if you have that level of trust and you make those kind of decisions where the group is like, "I don't know about this," whether it be a player, tactical change or something. But if you have that level of trust and accountability built up, then they'll go, "Okay, if this is what you think is best, then we'll
We'll
do
run
it."
with it. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then that kind of leads to the actual side of the program. So how do you build a successful program on the level of uh, wins, and then how do you sustain that over time?
Uh, that's a difficult question.
Pretty loaded for sure.
Yeah. So how do you build a successful program? Right? That was a question?
Yeah. So So how do you, so obviously like the first question was like, how do you build a successful culture on buy-in and mindset, right? Because that's obviously one piece of the puzzle. But then there's obviously the other side of it. It's like, so how do you win with this program that you've built, and then how do you sustain it? Like going one and done, like Vermont, right? Like we've never seen that before. So like, how do they build to that? But now it's like, how do they sustain that over time? Or like these ACC schools, Duke, Wake Forest soccer, right? Or these guys have built it over time. So like, how do you sustain it? How do you continue that? Especially as a JUCO, then you only have 2 years at a time with these girls. Maybe three, I guess, with injures or redshirt, I guess. But realistically, how do you build a successful program on wins?
Yeah. I mean, I don't have a lot of experience to really build off on that, but I'd say
And you can answer this just so you know too.
definitely recruiting, right? You need to be able to recruit top level players. Right. I think at the college level, it's a mixture of the two, right? Recruiting the talent, but then being able to put those pieces together, right? Our assistant coach at College of Southern Idaho, the way he described the women's team this year, because we had the injuries and we're kind of changing parts, and he was like, the team is a clock, and you always have to figure out how to put the pieces together to make the clock work. And he's like, and sometimes the pieces change, right? And so I find that, I mean, your team's always changing, especially at JUCO level, that you're always getting new pieces, and it's just how quickly can you put those pieces together to make the clock work, right? And I think as you get older and you have more experience, you find out better ways to put those pieces together, right? So I think like someone like Nick Saban, right, when he's at Alabama, one, he's recruiting top level players, right, and the top talent, but then he's very good at, right, he has the culture, and then he knows how to put those pieces together very quickly.
Yep. Yep.
So I think that's kind of how you get the success, right? You get the players, right? Like Vermont, for example, right? They've had the success now, right? Assuming that coach stays,
Yeah.
right? The culture's there, the coach is there. Players now know Vermont is a program that can win titles,
Yep.
so you'll attract the top talent. And I assume that the coach there now has the experience of like, okay, I made this work. I know how to kind of make it work in the future, right? And fix things together. A lot of it too, I think, is luck. Sometimes things go your way, sometimes things don't. I mean, look at Marshall. I watched Marshall, in my opinion, get dominated by West Virginia in their conference right?
Yeah.
West Virginia was the best team in their conference this year. But Marshall made it to the final again, right? They figured it out, right? The coach went probably back to the drawing board and was like, okay, this didn't work. These are the struggles we've had throughout the season. I know they had some injuries. But he's had the experience, he's had the success, right? So he was like, okay, I know how to win in the tournament. I know how to win these games. This is what we're going to change, right? So I think that's the biggest thing, is just the experience and things like that. A lot of young coaches, I feel like, especially in soccer, I mean, you look at professionals, there'll be coaches that come into professional, like the Premier League, and they have success, and then all of a sudden it's like they fizzle out.
Yeah.
Right. And it's what happened. Well, maybe they came into a team like Chelsea that was really good, but they didn't create the culture, or they didn't know how to put the pieces together, or they couldn't recruit. Right.
Yeah,
and then
right.
So the next 2 years, the program starts to go down, or it's like, oh,
Yeah.
why are they mid-table now?
Yeah.
So
exactly. No, I think it's true. I mean, yeah, obviously there's a bunch of moving pieces to a program at any level, right? Like high school, professional, collegiate. There's so many moving pieces in order to find success, in order for you to maintain it. So I do think it is luck, right? Everything has to fall in your favor a little bit, but at the same time, it takes a lot of time to actually build it, right? Like you're not gonna find necessarily, like, I guess in the sense of college football, like when Nick Saban left, Coach DeBoer, who came in from Washington, like he's still gonna find some sort of success, because it's not like it's still Alabama, right? But it just might not be at Nick Saban's level. But like same thing at Duke. I know the women's head coach retired this year. Like, so whoever steps into that place, which that's another one of those, like, you have to big shoes to fill. Another one like that, like, you're probably still gonna have some success because it's Duke, and you're probably gonna have some of those girls stick around. But at the same time, right, like, it can either stay the same, you might dip a little bit, but either way, like, you'll probably feel that coach gone a little bit. But yeah, as you said, it takes a little bit of time to build a culture, not only or build a program, excuse me, not only for your wins and stuff, but to change what your mindset is for what you want as a coach,
Mhm.
and what you're building
Yeah.
with your coaching staff. So
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, to use another football example, I mean, Bill Belichick had a
oh
dynasty,
yeah,
right? And then those players kind of phased out. And I feel like the Patriots kind of struggled to get back to that success. I'm
yeah, they're
really
still
interested to
struggling.
see what. Yeah, I'm a Colts fan, so I'm okay with them struggling. But
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
I'm actually interested to see what he does at UNC. I was really
Oh yeah,
surprised he took that
absolutely.
job.
Yeah.
I don't know a whole lot about football, but
Just to see what he can do would be
seeing a
cool.
big name coach go into college now, in my opinion, college football is a little more like professional now with how NIL and the portal is. So,
Absolutely,
and obviously he's a big name, so I think players will want to go play for him because of
absolutely.
that.
Yeah,
But um, on the soccer side, programs like UNC, UCLA, I mean, those are programs that have had different coaches over the years and still somehow keep
have
having the same
success.
success. So especially on the women's side, Anson Dorrance just left UNC, but UCLA's had a couple of different coaches. Um, I think it's just the program is what attracts players now, not so much the coach. It's people know UCLA is good, or I want to go live in LA.
I was gonna say,
UNC is
yeah,
always
that
good. They have a history.
demographic
Yeah,
probably makes a difference too.
yeah, yeah. I can't say a lot of people want to come to Idaho, but we make it work.
Absolutely,
And then
yeah,
they get
absolutely.
there and they realize how beautiful it is. So
For sure. I'll be honest with you. The only thing I know about Idaho is Boise with the Bluefield and it's a potato. That's it. Potatoes are grown there. That's it. That's it. Which is probably super naive. I've never been to Idaho, so obviously I'm like probably like some people think New Mexico is part of Mexico. Like they're just naive to it, you know. Oh,
yeah,
you speak you speak English very well. Well, I'm American, but you know.
yeah. They've never seen
um,
Breaking Bad.
of course. Oh,
It's,
yeah. I guess
yeah,
not.
yeah,
I don't know. I guess they just kind of just
yeah,
disregard the
yeah,
fact that they must have slept through their U.S. history or their geography class. So whatever.
yeah, yeah.
So everything that you've mentioned to me, you've talked about, what you enjoy about coaching. You've talked about how you build a culture. You've talked about how you uh, build a successful program, which I appreciate all those dive-ins. But I want to ask this question. It's my favorite question, and it's the name of the show. Is why do you coach? What's your coach's why?
I feel like how I say this has changed over the years, but it really goes back to the relationship thing we talked
Mhm.
about earlier, and I think the impact that we can have on people. Again, going back to this book, I'm actually rereading it right now, called Inside Out Coaching. It talks about transformational coaching, and that's really kind of what my why is based off of. My why is the legacy I leave, but not in terms of wins, championships, but the how players remember me. Um, and I don't. I guess the other side of that is I don't have this vision of myself that I'm so great that players are going to be like, oh, I want to play for Coach Andrew, or I love that I played for him. I understand there's going to be players who don't have a good experience, but I think if there's a good number of players in my future, that have played for me that I've helped them in some way or changed their lives in some way or just had some kind of impact, that really is kind of what I want to have. Inside Out Coaching, to reference that book again, talks a lot about Joe Ehrman, I believe is the guy who wrote the book. He coached high school football, and he talked about people would always go, oh, "How good is your team going to be, or how good are these players?" And something he says in the book that always stuck with me is like, "Well, don't ask me now. Ask me in 5 years when they're a husband or they're a father. How good
Yeah,
I did with these players, because to me that's what I'm developing. I'm developing young men, young women to be better people." Um, And that's something that's always really kind of motivated me, under the soccer part is, how do I help people that maybe don't have, a father figure, or don't have a mother at home, or maybe don't have siblings, or don't have a good structure? How do I give them that through sport? Because I think we all know a lot of kids play sports, a lot of kids play college sports, but they don't go on to play professionally, right? And that's just the reality of what we do. Is especially in America, a lot of people just fall through the cracks. So for me, the next step is I want to make them fall in love with the sport that I coach, and help them become better people, and better versions of themselves. And like I said earlier, I think in turn they make me a better person. They help me learn along the way, and kind of develop through everything.
Damn, I like that. I'm gonna have to get that book, Inside Out Coaching. I haven't read that book yet, but it sounds like it would be really beneficial to read, just to kind of see how it's written, and some of those analogies or situations that he's mentioning.
Yeah, it's really good. I just read the part where he talks about, not to give too much away, but he has three coaching idols that he picks up early in his career, right? Because he realizes when he was playing professional football, he had issues that he dealt with in his life, and he's like, a lot of coaches fed off the anger I had built up, and used that, and they were transactional coaches. And so the three, um, I guess, role models he had were, his lacrosse coach, which he talks about a lot in the book, Moses, right? And he explains why it's like things that he does in the story of Moses. And then the other one is, Dorothy from The Wizard of Oz, right? And how she navigates, coaching, right? He calls it coaching. The Tin Man, the lion. I don't remember the characters' names, but the lion, and then the scarecrow, right? And helping them become better versions of themselves. So it's interesting to see someone that's like played at a high level, they coach, they do all these things, but then they're like, these are the people I look to shape my coaching, and it's not even sports people besides the one, right? So, I love it. It's a book I've, for years, since I read it 6 years ago, that I'm always like, if you're a coach, read this book. It changed. It changed my perspective on a lot of things.
Well, mentioning, like, I didn't ask this question earlier, but you're mentioning how, I guess about his coaches, or who he looks into, to get, I guess, motivation, or to kind of follow. What coaches made an impact on you? I mean, well, who were they and why? If it was one, you can name as many or as little as you want, but who were your coaches who made an impact on your life?
Yeah, it's kind of like the book. It's been different people for different reasons. I think I had a coach growing up for club that, I have a good relationship with him now. I don't talk to him a lot, but I don't have any like hard feelings. But it was a coach that I didn't like playing for, and I ended up quitting his team because of how I felt. And when I first got into coaching, I was like, this is how I felt. This is how my coach made me feel. This is how I felt playing on this team. I want to make sure I do everything possible to make sure my players don't feel that way. And I feel like coaching early on, it really impacted how I created that culture, because I wanted to make sure everyone felt included, everyone felt heard, and everyone felt supported. And as I gained experience and read more books and different things like that, obviously, like, I learned different tools and stuff like that. But that definitely had an impact on my early coaching career of like, okay, how do I want players to see me or feel being coached by me, right? I have another one I kind of look to that is an odd one. He's a parent coach that I met in California. Not really a soccer guy. He played in high school and growing up in California, but other than that, I met him when he coached rec, and he's a salesman, which makes sense, but probably the best at like dealing with people and making that connection that I've ever seen. And when I was coaching with him in California, he would talk to me and be like, "Oh, like, I need your advice," or like, "You have more experience than me and you know these things and that things." And I was like, "No, man, like, I need to talk to you and learn from you, because the way you deal with people and get people to buy in and navigate these personal relationships is just like levels above me." And I was like, that's the side that I lack. And so that's someone that I feel like because of who he is, we're friends now and we have a deep relationship. And I'll call him and talk to him about coaching stuff all the time, even though maybe X's and O's and stuff like that. It's a different level or different experience or what have you. But um, just, when he's older than me, he's like in his 40s. So like, it's almost like another older brother or father figure in terms of, hey man, I'm going through this, or I've had this problem with these players. Like, what would you do? How would you handle this? And, it means a lot to me kind of having those relationships and those people in your life, because the soccer stuff you can find everywhere, but when you have people that influence your behavior and maybe how you deal with people, I think is a little more impactful, especially if you're trying to build those relationships and cultures and things like that I think are really important, right? The X's and O's come later.
Absolutely. Yeah. I actually love that. They say keep the circle around you who you want to be, right? Or whatever that reference is. And obviously, like high powerful coaches is great. Like we all want to win, we all want to have success, maybe on the pitch or on the mat or whatever we're doing on the field. But we also want to create great people, as you mentioned, right? But at the same time, it's a lot of it comes down to the people that you're around that influence or that are helping you build these people or build your own mental or physical or spiritual, whatever it is, right? Approaches to things. So I can appreciate that you have somebody who helps you on the personal or on the social side of things, because that's just as big as knowing your schemes is knowing how to talk to people, So absolutely.
Yeah. And obviously one of my mentors as well is he's the soccer guy, right? Like I talked to him about players and recruiting and stuff like that, but I mean, he's been the biggest resource in terms of the X's and O's for me. I mean, he's the guy. He coaches at Westcliff right now, but he's the guy years ago that I talked to, and I was like, "Am I bad at this? Is this normal?" And he was the one that was, no, that means if you're analyzing, you're doing the right thing.
Oh, right.
You're progressing. So, I think you need to, in your circle, you have different people for different things, right? That's
Absolutely
how you have the complete thing.
Yep. Well, I can tell you guys this. If you guys are still listening to this podcast, if you're on YouTube, make sure you guys HTB, like, subscribe, all the 9 yards. If you guys are an audio listener, PocketCasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, whatever it is, make sure you guys leave a review. Hit those stars. Say what you got to say, but whatever you say it with your chest, because we want to hear it. I can tell you this, Coach, that I'm on to my final question, kind of the fun one, I think. So I'm going to hear your thing. I want to hear what you got to say here. What state in the United States has the best high school girls soccer?
California.
Okay.
California.
Do you want to dive into that on your reasoning behind it, or is it just is there something that is just kind of like, yeah, it is what it is?
Well, I guess let me ask this question: do you mean which state has the best level of soccer, or which one has the most like entertaining?
I would say the best. That's a great question. I would say probably the best on the level of probably the first question. Probably not entertaining, but I think the best level of soccer.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I asked that because I found Idaho, the level's a little more even, so it's kind of entertaining in terms of the back and forth. But California for sure. I mean, shout out Mater Dei High School, and Maddie for giving me an opportunity to coach there. But going back to the difference between the states, the level of talent and how big the pool is in California is just too big. So you get a lot of kids. I mean, Mater Dei, you get girls who are going Division I. I mean, there's a girl that was there when I was there playing varsity, and now she plays in Europe. I mean, you get top level kids. The other states have that, but it's just you may have a couple high schools that have that level, and I feel like in California you have several high schools that get that talent.
I think it's interesting that you say that, and I'll keep this short, but in wrestling, there's a big debate in like what states have the best high school wrestling. Like a lot of people, and I have yet to say my opinion on this because I don't want to be that guy yet. I'll wait. Who knows when that time will come, but I haven't yet said my opinion yet. But like they said, like New Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania, that little tri-state is the best high school wrestling. Pennsylvania is the best state, is what they say, but then that region is the best. And then some people argue like the best overall region is like Ohio, Illinois, Indiana, that area, Michigan. But then
Okay.
I've heard that California is the best just because, as you mentioned, the pool, like there's so many, like
Yeah.
in the state of California, you have so many like rings you have to get through just to qualify for the state. And then I've heard like the argument that I heard was, the state of California's pool, whoever makes it to the state tournament, each one of
Mhm.
those guys can go play or participate at the next level versus some
Yeah.
states it's like maybe the top 10 or top 16 or whatever the case is versus California is such a deep pool. So
Yeah.
just to kind of reference that, I have heard that, California is so it's just deep, right? Depth wise is
Yeah.
just it's just huge and it's so much has so many people that can compete.
Yeah, and I assume the other sports are like this as well. But for soccer, I mean, at Mater Dei, we would have like 60 freshmen come try out, and we can only take 30 or 40, whatever we took for the two teams. So I mean, yeah, like you said, they kind of have to pass the first hurdle, and if you're not good enough, you're not. And then the
There it
next
is.
hurdle was next hurdle is JV. If you don't make JV, I mean, our school usually got cut, and then varsity, obviously, it's
For
the
sure.
final. But yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I can really appreciate your time today, man. I thought it was a really good episode. I think I've already told you, I did tell you this off air, but I would love to have you back on here. I think if you guys haven't noticed, I'm in a different area than I started the podcast. I did get called back into work, so we had a little bit of a gap here. But I think I'd love to have you sit down again with you and really dive into the schematics and the behind the scenes of your program because I think you're doing some really good stuff up there in Idaho. And not only myself, but I'm sure there's some other coaches who would love to hear how the hell you are building your program behind the scenes, right? Your whiteboard and
Yeah.
everything else. So, but yeah, I really appreciate you coming out here. I'd love to have you on again.
Yeah, for sure. No, I appreciate your time and the talk. I think it was good, and then I'd love to come back on.
Hell yeah, man. Well, I appreciate that. As I mentioned to you guys, thank you guys for listening. Thank you guys for watching. But with that being said, we will see you guys on the next one. Peace.